flat earth and other nonsense dealing with ideas that would not exist if not for internet. It perplexes us to see that belief in a flat earth is gaining traction, despite being thoroughly debunked for thousands of years. This idea was almost non-existent until recently, yet this particular branch of pseudoscience is making inroads. It's notable that the article "The Flat Earth Myth, Busting the Myth That the Church Taught a Flat Earth," written as recently as 2013, did not receive any negative comments from flat earth believers. Why? Because there were hardly any people back then who believed it. Rather, readers were grateful to see that the church had never taught this nonsense. Several honest atheists have even slammed people from their own side who have pushed a bad pseudo-history that accuses the church of teaching a flat earth. Even though the flat earth myth has been addressed multiple times, and even though the biblical and scientific arguments against it, people have recently started to ask about it. My only conclusion is that the internet is breeding people who have trouble thinking through important ideas. By necessity, this video aims to show, enlighten, and be very thorough in demonstrating how wrong flat earthism is on so many levels, biblically, historically, and scientifically. Here are several evidences I think are impossible to refute. 1. The Earth and the Moon. The shadow of the Earth, when cast on the Moon during a lunar eclipse, is round. This was known in ancient times. But note that lunar eclipses do not always happen when the Moon is in the same position in the sky. If the Earth were flat, the Earth's shadow would not have the same shape when the Moon is directly overhead as it would when the Moon is closer to the horizon. Since it is possible to observe multiple full and partial lunar eclipses during an average lifetime, this would not have been lost on any observant person, even in the distant past. Note that this is assuming one model of a flat Earth, the one where the Sun and Moon cross under the Earth as they travel back to the east. Also, if the Sun and Moon were orbiting overhead, as in some recent flat Earth models, then how could the Earth ever get in between them to cast a shadow in the first place? The Moon's phases are also proof that it's orbiting a global Earth. In real life, at any given part of the Moon's cycle, all people on Earth see the same phase, and the Moon is always about the same size. This makes sense if it were orbiting the globe from a distance far greater than the Earth's diameter. If it and the Sun were always orbiting above a flat Earth, as per a recent flat Earth scenario, then they would both change size drastically, and people in different areas would see different Moon phases. Someone looking toward the Moon would be presented with a different view than someone looking at it from the other end of the Earth. Note also, if the Moon and Sun were flat disks, then their apparent shape would become more elliptical as they moved lower in the sky. The fact that a full Moon and Sun always look circular from any angle shows that they are spheres, not disks. 2. Things disappearing over the horizon. People have often noted that ships coming up over the horizon appear sail first. That is, the highest portion of the vessel comes into view while the lower parts are still hidden by the bulge of the Earth. It's so well known that there is an old naval term for it, hull down. Sailors could even roughly estimate distance from their own height and how far down the other ship was. And the same happened in reverse, with observers on ships seeing objects on land. Also, higher observers could see further, hence the advantage of the crow's nest, see for calculations, box, below. Indeed, this was explained well back in the Middle Ages by John Sacrobosco, circa 1195 circa 1256, in his Tractatus de Sphera, treatise on the sphere, that is the Earth. Flat earthers often produce photos of things that are visible even though they are so far away they should be below the horizon. However, these are almost always over water, which on rare occasions, usually in the spring, can produce a temperature inversion, that is cold air below warmer air. This, in turn, causes refraction, bending light around the curve, so we see things we normally wouldn't. in what is called a superior mirage. This is quite uncommon, and photos of the same area under most conditions would not show the mirage, even on the clearest days. Also, mirages can be minimized when the object and view are a few meters high, so the line of sight mostly avoids the inversion layer. Importantly, videos, as opposed to still photos, show that the images change rapidly. They tend to shimmer, flip, duplicate, triplicate, etc., thanks to fluctuations in the air, as we would expect from a mirage. I wonder why flat earthers almost never show videos of these horizon features. I also wonder why they do not time the passing of the sun, for when it is rising and setting. It rises a little earlier and sets a little later than we would expect because of atmospheric lensing. In essence, every sunset is a mirage. 3. The absurd spotlight sun. To try to evade the severe problems with time zones, see below. A common modern flat Earth idea is that the sun is like a spotlight, floating a few thousand miles above the Earth and shining down in a localized area. Added to the simple observational contradictions above, everybody who has ever seen a flashlight torch in use at night knows you can see it from the side. But even if the light coming from the sun was perfectly uniform in its starting direction, as soon as light hits air it begins to scatter. This is the reason the sky is blue whenever the sun is up, even at the far side of the sky from the sun. If the sun was above the earth but not visible because the sun is like a spotlight, a huge portion of the sky would still be blue. There is another difficult puzzle they cannot solve. This has to do with the shape of the area in the sunlight portions of the Earth and the way this changes through the seasons. Let's test this by looking at what is being illuminated during January, June, and March, September. That is, at the solstices and equinoxes. For those who do not know what these terms mean, the solstices occur in the winter and summer when the sun's apparent path is highest in the sky, the summer solstice, or lowest in the sky. The winter solstice comes from Latin meaning sun standing still, that is its path is neither rising nor sinking. There are 2 equinoxes every year, in the spring and fall, when all portions of the Earth receive 12 hours of light and 12 hours of darkness. Equinox comes from the Latin meaning equal night, that is equal to the day. How does this look on a flat Earth? In the northern hemisphere summer, the North Pole receives 24 hours of light, the famous midnight sun. In fact, anything within the Arctic Circle is bathed in sunlight for an entire day during the summer solstice, the day the sun does not set. At the same time, Antarctica gets essentially no light at all as the sun is below the horizon across approximately 99% of the continent. Everywhere in the Antarctic Circle, the sun remains below the horizon for 24 continuous hours at least once per year, even at noon. How could a round spotlight produce a straight line like this on a flat Earth? The beam of sunlight should be at least roundish, but instead it illuminates fully one half of the flat Earth map with a perfectly straight line between light and dark. Why does Columbia not see the edge of the sun's circle first, and why does it not get more hours of daylight, since this is where the fat part of the sun will pass overhead? The answers to these questions is simple. The Earth is actually a globe, and the sun is actually very large and very far away. Spotlight sun? No. Spherical Earth? Yes. 4. Parallax problems. One of the worst aspects of the flat Earth claim is that to believe it you also have to deny simple trigonometry. You see, if 2 people standing at different places on the Earth, but in known distance apart, simultaneously measure the angle to the sun, from a theoretical chord drawn through the Earth, they get approximately the same answer. Why? Because the sun is so far away that parallax is almost non-existent. It amounts to just over 8 inches of angle. 0.000407 degrees. What happens if the Earth is flat and 2 people try this? Let's say someone measures the angle to the sun at sunrise. At the exact time someone else on the other side of the world measures it at their sunset. They both get an angle of 0. This means that the sun must be sitting on the earth. In the north-south direction, stars that appear overhead at night to an observer on the equator would appear to be sitting on the ground to an observer at the North Pole, and yet, both parties would claim those stars are very far above their heads indeed. The moon and the sun have almost the same angular size, about half a degree, making total solar eclipses possible. From similar triangles, it follows that the sun must be as many times the moon's size as it is far away, 400 times. Flat earthers, as well as some geocentrists, deny the clear trigonometric evidence for the vast size of these bodies, especially the sun. 5. Time zones. When most people think of a flat Earth, they think of the sun going under the Earth at night. This would mean the entire surface would be illuminated as long as the sun was up, and all parts of the Earth would experience the same sunrise time and sunset time. However, we know that different longitudes have different time zones. For instance, now that we have the ability to communicate across the Earth, this argument is even stronger. Many of us have had to be careful when calling someone in another country, in case we catch them in the middle of the night, and they become irate at being woken up. Also, when CMI USA staff have Skype meetings with their colleagues in CMIO, it's usually evening in America and morning in Australia. One thing astronomically inclined northern visitors to the southern hemisphere love to do is see the Southern Cross. This constellation is not exactly at the southern celestial pole, but it cannot be seen in most of the northern hemisphere. People in Europe and North America can't see it no matter how powerful their telescopes. Yet this constellation features on the flags of two countries with CMI offices, Australia and New Zealand. Brazil's flag features the cross and more stars visible only from the southern hemisphere. But as consolation, northerners can see Polaris, the North Star. People can never see this from the southern hemisphere, even with the best telescopes, and no matter how far north they look. This even applies to countries in the same time zone. For example, South Africa and Germany share the same time zone. South Africans can see the Southern Cross at night while at the same time Germans are seeing Polaris. The sun, moon and planets move along a line called the ecliptic, but the ecliptic is toward the south at that latitude in the northern hemisphere and toward the north at that latitude in the southern hemisphere. Why? Because the Earth is a sphere. Another disconcerting aspect of living on a sphere is that after the sun rises in the northern hemisphere it moves diagonally up to the right, but it moves diagonally up to the left in the southern hemisphere. 6. Stars rotate around celestial poles in opposite directions. Another illustration of the same phenomenon is using time-lapsed photography to see the stars in the northern hemisphere revolving anti-clockwise, counterclockwise, around Polaris, or more precisely, the celestial North Pole. In the southern hemisphere stars appear to revolve clockwise around the celestial South Pole. Speaking of rotation, in tropical cyclones or hurricanes, the powerful winds blow anti-clockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern, because of the Coriolis effect on a sphere. They would rotate in the same direction if the Earth were a spinning flat disk. 7. The missing South Pole. Another problem lies with the modern flat Earth claims that the Earth is encircled by an enormous Antarctic ring due south from everywhere. And what do we make of the Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station? It was built by the United States and is manned year-round, and has a web camera that's accessible anywhere in the world via the Internet. There is no South Pole on a flat Earth. 8. Circumnavigation of the globe. While it was a myth that Columbus was the only spherical earther of his day, he, and of course everyone else, did realize that if you sailed west far enough, you could make it back to where you came from, barring land masses in the way. In fact, this was well known at least a century before him in the fictional work The Travels of Sir John Mandeville. One of the stories involves such a journey, and the author expected his readers to know that the Earth is a sphere. Later, the expeditions of Ferdinand Magellan VI, 1480–1521, and Sir Francis Drake, 1540–1596, did circumnavigate the globe, as did the HMS Beagle with the young Charles Darwin aboard as the gentleman companion of Captain Robert Fitzroy, a devout Christian who later became a creationist. Now of course we have airliners doing this. 2 of the board members of CMI-US are pilots, so are they also lying when they say they fly across the globe, to say nothing of their thousands of passengers? 9. Astronauts in space. The International Space Station has now gone around the Earth over 100,000 times, carrying with it more than 220 different astronauts over the past 15 years. One astronaut, Colonel Jeff Williams, has recently returned from his 4th trip to space. Not only has Colonel Williams set the record for cumulative days in space, 534, but he is also an outspoken Christian! 7 He and other astronauts have taken thousands of pictures and hundreds of hours of videos of the Earth from space, many of which are available online. You can patch these together seamlessly to make a montage of the entire Earth, and it is demonstrably a sphere. All of these scientists and astronauts are not lying. 10. Earthquakes and seismic waves. Earthquakes are often very powerful events, and their waves can travel enormous distances. Geophysicists have learned much about the Earth from such seismic waves, which travel at known speeds. The most important for our purposes are the 2 major categories, body waves and surface waves. The first go through the Earth, while the second stay close to the surface. And as expected, if the waves are strong enough to be detected by seismographs at a great distance from the site of the earthquake, the body waves will arrive quite a long time before the surface waves, even though the surface waves from powerful earthquakes can travel around the world several times. The reason for this is simple: body waves have less distance to travel. But here's the key: on a globe, the ratio between the surface distance and the through-the-Earth distance increases as points become further apart. This is because the through-the-Earth distance is a chord of a circle and the surface distance is an arc, see diagram. On a flat Earth, the ratio would be the same for shallow earthquakes and almost the same for deeper earthquakes. The distance to the detector can be treated as the hypotenuse of a very flat right-angled, or right, triangle. Seismologists have been recording earthquakes from all around the world since the last decade of the 19th century, and of course their results have been consistent with the global Earth. Again, this is information known long before NASA. It is a simple fact that body waves arrive earlier than surface waves, and this ratio changes with distance from the epicenter. This can only be true if the travel distances are proportionally different, that is, the Earth is not flat. Yet another test involves only the surface waves. If you have an array of detectors at various points on the Earth, you can time how long it takes for the surface waves to travel between the points. The flat Earth map puts places like Australia and South America on opposite sides. But the time it takes for surface waves to travel between them is proportional to a much smaller distance. In fact, if you network the times between the thousands of stations currently positioned around the Earth, after accounting for various slight discrepancies, the only way to make any sense of the data is if you project them onto a spherical surface. So in summary, seismologists all around the world long ago showed that the Earth must be a sphere, indeed, a sphere laid in spherical shells, or spheres within spheres. There is simply no other way to make sense of the data.